Right. If everybody is ready, I think we should start. Welcome everyone to this webinar entitled How to Teach Speaking, and I'm very glad to see you all here, and I hope to see some more names appear. Hopefully they're just running late. Let's start with the rules of this webinar and how webinars work. In case this is your first one, you may already have noticed that I have muted everyone. This has been done for technical reasons. Basically, we have found that since there are quite a lot of people here, we could hear everybody's background noises if you were not muted, and it would just not be a pleasant experience, believe me. But it doesn't mean that this is not an interactive webinar. We do want you to communicate, well, I do want you to communicate with me, and you can do that through that chat box that we have already used. If you have any questions or queries about anything that I mentioned, if you want me to slow down, go back one slide, or merely you just have a question, enter it in this chat box, and I will carefully monitor what's happening in this chat box, and I will reflect on any topic or question that you have mentioned. Again, if you have any problems with the audio or anything, just enter it here. So whatever you want to communicate to me, you can do it through this chat box. I've already talked to some of you, but we have new arrivals since then. Please make sure that you have downloaded the audio from that Dropbox site that I sent the link to. I have copy and pasted that link in the chat box before everybody arrived. So if you scroll up, you can click on it and download the audio. At the end of this training, we will need that audio, and you will need to play it for yourself. So it is absolutely imperative that you have it on your computer. We will do some surveys too during this training. I will ask some questions. Again, you will be able to enter your answers in this chat box, and that's how we can do sort of do some votes and stuff. I will send you every material involved in this webinar, again through a Dropbox link following the training. And we are recording this webinar, and we have recorded the morning session as well, because there was a morning session for the same webinar, and we will post one of them. I'm not sure which one at the moment, but we will post one of them on the website in case you want to go back and listen to it in the future. You will be able to do it. So let's start, if we are all ready. So welcome everyone again. This is not me, but my name is Luca Birczak, and then I'm going to talk about teaching speaking. Let's have a look at the agenda. We will have a look at the brief background of teaching speaking. Then we will have a look at some of the most common challenges that teachers are having. We'll move on to the 4 elements of the communicative competence later on. And then we will have a look at actual speaking activities, starting from basic to more advanced activities. Then we will have a look at the challenges that we talked about at the beginning, and towards the end of the training we will talk about tips on how to overcome them. We will very briefly talk about how to use the internet in teaching speaking, because that's a vast area that I could talk about for weeks basically, but I will present you with a few tips. And finally we will close with having a look at how we can actually provide our students with feedback on speaking and how we can assess spoken performance. So let's start with the survey. Where are you sitting right now? Please enter it in the chat box. Which country are you in? We have a lot of Hungarians today, but I know that we have other nationalities as well. Netherlands, wonderful. I have asked the same question in the morning session as well, and I can show you a map based on the participants of both of the trainings, so both this one and the morning one, and I think it is quite impressive that all together, including the morning one, these are the countries that we have covered, and these are the countries that we have covered in Europe, again counting this session and the morning session all together. Another question, what age group do you teach? Who do you teach? Is it kids, teenagers, adults? Right. Nice. So I think all together, all of you have covered what you can see on the screen right now. Yeah, children aged 6 to 12, young adult professionals, or high school students. Now, let's start with a bit of background to teaching speaking, but I will try to keep it, well, short, because that will be the slightly boring part. What do methodology books say about teaching speaking? According to some books, there are 3 areas of knowledge. One of them, the first one is mechanics, which entails pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary. Once we got the basics down, the mechanics down, we can move on to functions involved in transaction and interaction. And finally, we need to have a look at the third area of speaking, which is the social and cultural rules and norms of speaking. And this entails turn-taking, rate of speech, length of pauses between speakers, relationship between participants, etc. So according to some methodology books, these are the 3 areas of knowledge that we actually need to pass on to our students if we want them to succeed. Now, it is actually the #1 most important skill for students. I have read this in a recent survey, but I think any survey usually suggests that speaking is the most important skill for students. I think for me it is quite obvious why that is. If you think about an average day you spend from morning till the evening, if you think about what skill you use more often, it is actually speaking. You spend most of your time actually speaking to other people. In fact, I think you spend much more time speaking than reading or writing. So it is the most common means of communication. And I think, yeah, and there is also, I think this is also reflected in the term, the English term, do you speak English? I know it's not the same in every language, but in the English language, when we are referring to someone's knowledge of a language, we use the term speak. Do you speak English? Do you speak Italian? Students want to be able to speak English. They want to be able to communicate verbally using English, so it is extremely important for them. It is, however, one of the biggest challenges for teachers for a number of reasons. It is actually an extremely difficult skill to develop because it cannot be taught. A lot of research suggests that speaking cannot be taught at all. Basically, practice makes perfect principle applies here. The more they do it, the better they will become at it. And this poses the question of how to practice, how to make them practice enough so that they can become better. And also, like Judith said, students are exposed the most in speaking. If you think about a reading activity, nobody is going to be ridiculed just because they got one question wrong in a reading comprehension task. But every student has to, especially teenagers, can be sometimes quite cruel towards each other. So every student has to face the fear of being ridiculed because of their mistakes. So that's why it is something that students usually fear a lot. So all in all, it's a skill that is extremely important, but it is difficult to practice in the classroom. And for some countries or for some students, it is extremely difficult to practice outside of the classroom. So what we need to do basically is it's not enough if we give them a practice opportunity in class, because this is something that they could do alone. We need to teach them the sub-skills of speaking, and we also need to teach them the strategies with which they can repair their language, with which they can actually solve communication problems, communication breakdowns. Basically, we need to teach them what they cannot learn outside the classroom. And this way we can somehow try and break the frightening mountain of speaking down to sort of a series of slopes. Now, let's move on to challenges. If you have any challenges in your classroom related to teaching speaking, what is it? if you want to share it with us, you don't have to, obviously. But do you have anything that you find to be the biggest challenge in the classroom? Shyness. Students lack ideas to share. Yes, it is a very valid point. Shyness, reluctance to speak. Yes. Mixed ability groups, big classes. Well, I'm very happy to see all this input, because I'm hoping that I have already covered some of them. And in fact, I'm hoping that I have covered most of which. I have come up with 6 challenges, and I think most of them are covered by your own ideas. Let's see the first one. Strong students usually dominate conversations. They are too conscious about mistakes and are afraid to talk. We have mentioned this, or you have mentioned this. My students are unwilling to speak in class. My students seem unmotivated by speaking tasks. Students don't know where to start, and the classes are too big, so there is no way of monitoring if everybody has a chance to speak. So these are just the most common problems that teachers are facing in the classroom. And in the course of this training, I will try and, or together, we can try and come up with some tips on how to overcome them. So let's just remember these 6 speech bubbles. We will come back to them, and we will talk about how we can actually overcome these problems and what to do when they actually happen. Now let's move on to the 4 basic communicative competencies. And I know this is something that we have all heard at university or in our CELTA courses, and it's just overemphasized everywhere, since we have a communicative language teaching, that we have the communicative competence. But I think it is important, and it really helps us remind ourselves what we need to teach these people if they want to speak. Obviously, there is grammatical competence, which entails phonology, vocabulary, word and sentence formation. We have discourse competence, which is basically a grasp of coherence and cohesion. We have the social linguistic competence, which involves understanding functions and social rules of language. And we have strategic competence, which are basically all the compensation strategies that students can employ if something goes wrong during talking. And I will start with this, because I have found in my own experience that this is something that sometimes gets neglected. Whatever I'm going to say, whenever I'm going to say generalizations, what I mean is in my own experience. My own colleagues in my high school felt like this. Obviously, I don't mean that you are having the same problems as I do, but I am basing, obviously, these assumptions on my own life and experience. So strategic competence. So these are all the things that students can apply if trouble reaches them, if something goes wrong during communication. And all the strategic competence tools can be divided into, well, they all belong to 2 groups. One of them is getting help, and the other one is helping ourselves when we are talking. So there are the self-help tools and the getting help tools. Usually students are relatively familiar with the getting help tools, not so much with the self-help tools. So let's start with the getting help tools. We need to teach them how to ask for clarification, how to ask for repetition. We need to teach them exact terms to use and we need to also make sure that they understand that they can also prompt for clarification, such as repeating what their partner said. I don't know, with the phrase something like, a sentence like, do you mean going to the cinema? Or just basically repeating what their partner has just said and asking if it was right. Self-help strategies are slightly less known to candidates, so let's have a look at it. Look at them. One important tool is paraphrasing, where they actually go back and try to rephrase what they wanted to say. Another one is circumlocution, that we can, I think it's relatively easy to make them practice this with the definition task, where you have a big pile of cards with words on it, and they have to describe those words. Miming is an important part of self-help, even though we as teachers think that it's not really, you can't really mime in English. Obviously, miming is international, sort of. But I think it is important in real life to teach them how miming works and to make them practice it through some games such as activity or something similar, because miming is an important part of everyday communication. I sometimes use miming as well on a daily basis, so it is important just to remind themselves that this is something that they can use. Obviously, we need to teach them gap fillers such as let me think, and we really need to explicitly sort of tell them and teach them these words, because this is not something that they will just automatically realize that this is something that they have. We also need to raise their awareness about how useful it is when they speak more slowly. So whenever they are unsure about what they want to say, they can always just slow down and try to think while they are slowing down. Restructuring is another important tool, sort of a self-repair technique, and it is important that students try and correct their sentences if they make a mistake, if they want to. Obviously, it's their choice. I don't think accuracy is the most important part of speaking, the most important sub-skill of speaking. So if they choose to ignore the fact that they made a mistake, I think that's fine. But if they choose to go back and try to repair the sentence, I think that's great. And actually, in our exam, we really do value if they make an effort to repair their sentences. And this is, or repair, well, whatever, correct their sentences. And I think this is also reflected in our mark scheme, that we do value when they realize that they have made a mistake. They can also borrow from their mother tongue, their native language. Obviously, it is not something that we actually want to encourage, but I think it's important for them to know that this is a strategy that they can employ when they are in trouble. Again, we need to raise their awareness about the danger of false friends, such as I don't know if we have any Italians today, I can't remember, but simpatico, for example, and quite a lot of Latin languages have this expression, meaning someone is nice. Now, this word is non-existent in the English language, and sympathetic means something completely different. So quite a lot of students have this problem of finding false friends in their own language. So obviously, this is something that we need to be aware of. Generalization is something that could be extremely useful if students could do it. My students tend to want to only produce perfect sentences, and if they can't find the exact technical term they want to say, they will stop in the middle of a sentence. And I really do try hard to make them understand that the whole point of learning a language is communication. And there will always be moments when you want to say something that you can't really find the correct word for. And the correct strategy here is not to stop communication, but to replace the word that you can't think of with something that you know. And believe it or not, my own students don't do this, and they are not aware of this, that this is something that they could do. If you don't know what, I don't know, daffodil is, you can just say flower, or you can just say that yellow flower. And believe me, try telling this to your students. They usually have never heard about this. So use nice and stuff instead of the exact thing you wanted to say. Approximation is an extremely similar notion, using flower instead of rose, or using not happy instead of sad. Make sure you tell them these things so that they know that there is help at hand if they need it. Obviously, they can also change the topic. I know it sounds a bit silly, but they can change the topic. When the worst comes to the worst and they really do not really know what to say, we need to teach them phrases to keep the conversation going. We need to tell them that how to keep the conversation going. And we need to also teach them how to anticipate answers and how to just be ready to have some, I don't know, just to be able to anticipate their partner's answers. This is a poster that I will send you in a PDF format, and that's something that I think is a good idea if you print it off and just give one copy to your students, or to just, I don't know, put it up in the classroom so that when they are in trouble, they actually do know what to say. So I have a different poster when they don't understand something, and I have another one when they are hesitation type of words, when they are not sure what to say. Obviously, there are millions of others. I just created these two posters. Another thing that I do in terms of hesitation is the 2 minutes game. It's basically a board game, and I borrowed the idea from a UK radio show. One student has to talk about a given topic for 2 minutes without stopping, hesitating, repeating it, himself or herself, and deviating from the topic. It's an amazing game and people love it. I promise you that your students, no matter what age they are, will love it. You just need to create a board game with loads of topics, and topics obviously need to change according to level. So if you have very basic students, you can play it with basic ideas such as family, and if you have very advanced students, C1 students, you can give them very specific topics such as the opera or classical music or Van Gogh's paintings, because the more abstract the topic is, the more difficult the entire game is. Because the whole point is that the rest of the group will measure time very strictly, and they will also look out for moments of hesitation, repetition, deviation, and they will stop. Well, basically, the candidate will lose if he or she repeats himself or herself, or deviates or hesitates. And this is a very good opportunity for someone from the group to actually count the number of hesitation devices that the other person is using. I think it's an amazing activity, and I'm sure you will really like it. Now let's move on to the other area of communicative competence that we are going to cover today, which is the social linguistic competence. And I don't want to waste a lot of time on this. I will send you a list of turn-taking vocabulary. It's quite a long list, but I do think it is important that we teach these to our students. This includes quite a lot of language for interrupting politely, such as before you move on, or I'm afraid I have to stop you here. So it includes loads of sample language for interrupting. It includes loads of sample language for keeping your turn, so how to stop other people from interrupting you politely. I think these are actually extremely important parts of teaching speaking, and I'm sure your students will like it. I also have a turn-taking game or a turn-taking task where I have a given topic. Students will have to talk about it, and I have cards with turn-taking skills such as interrupt your partner, and the other person has the card, I don't know, don't let your partner interrupt you. And this way they can practice how to interrupt, how not to interrupt. So I have quite a lot of activities in connection with these kind of functional language of turn-taking. We also need to teach them the social rules of language use, such as how to address one another. We need to teach them the difference between addressing someone with the first name James and Mr. Smith. This is just a basic example. And social linguistic competence involves functional language, and I think teaching functional language is extremely important. And this is something that I love about our spoken exam, is that our exam is not really focusing on topics. We do have a comprehensive list of topics available for students to prepare for, but the success is not dependent on whether or not they get a topic that they're familiar with. Our spoken exam is very communicative, and as long as they know a functional language, they will be able to succeed. Just to give you an example, our part 3 is a discussion type of task where the candidate will have to reach an agreement together with the interlocutor. I think it is quite obvious that if you know the language of agreeing, disagreeing, reaching a compromise, it doesn't matter what kind of topic you need to discuss, you will be able to do it. I hope it's clear. So functional language is important because they are transferable to any conversation. And also, if you think about it, the pool of functional language phrases is relatively smaller than the rest of vocabulary. So they are a small pool of phrases, but extremely useful and transferable. So we really need to make sure that we teach them how to recommend something, how to refuse, how to agree, how to disagree. So let's start with the actual activities. And let's start with one of the challenges. If you remember, one of the speech bubbles was sad. Students don't know where to start. So my advice is start extremely small, just not to scare them. Give them time to prepare, and I think it's a good idea to start with very simple controlled practice, such as putting sentences together or just reading them out. Just to give you an example, again, this is something that I can send you so you can print it off. Having a conversation written down so that they have to match a question with the answer, and later on they can maybe act it out as well. But let's just start with a very basic sort of a matching question with an answer, then reading it out in pairs, and then maybe acting it out. And later on you can also record it. I think the fact that most people now have a smartphone is an amazing tool. In the classroom, you don't need to have your own I don't know, video recording device. All you need is just a few students with a smartphone, and you can create sort of short video clips, and students usually like recording each other and themselves. So I think it is a good idea to record them regularly, and you will see later why. Most of you already know that our spoken exam is actually recorded, and I think recording spoken performance makes it more tangible, makes assessment more objective, because I know when we speak there is no sort of there is no written record of what we are saying, and I think it is a good idea to record speaking regularly. It's good for students, and it will be good for us as well. It will be easier to assess. Also, start every lesson with a short speaking warm-up. Even if we are preparing for a written exam, for example, make sure we have at least a 5-minute speaking warm-up. With basic classes, I usually have the same sentence on every Monday. What did you do last weekend? And then I start with the same sentence on Friday. What are your plans for this weekend? And I know it may sound that it's boring, but it is extremely good for the weak students who can actually prepare for these basic questions. Obviously, with more advanced classes, I use different questions, such as convince your partner to start watching your favorite TV show. Also, make them practice social situations where the conversations tend to follow a script. Again, this is something that is good for the weaker type of students. If you think about every social situation, such as when you meet someone first thing in the morning, what do you tell them? Or when you go to the post office, how do you ask for stamps? Or when you accidentally bump into someone in the elevator, what do you say? These things are exactly follow the same script all the time. Therefore, answers are extremely predictable, and again, these are just good tasks to relieve anxiety, because students will actually learn these things by heart, and they will know how to react in these situations. So just one idea that I use, I have this PowerPoint slide, and I have loads more similar ones where I present them with a role play scenario. As most of you will know already, this is from our part 2, from our exam. This is a part 2 type of situation, and I have 2 versions of this activity. One of them is without any input. I just give them the role play, and they have to actually come up with an actual conversation that can follow from the scenario, or the version you can see right now, where I present them with one person's answer, and they will have to come up with whoever person B is, their answers. And then we discuss what they thought, and then I give them my own input. Obviously, I do it with more advanced students, but then I use the scenarios from B2, C1, C2 exams. I basically just copy these out from the practice papers that you can find on cityandguildsenglish.com. And I have millions of slides like this, and students really do like it a lot, because then they can actually prepare for these scenarios. And imagine if they can write a script for this, obviously they will be able to practice it later, and they will remember how they are supposed to react to scenarios like this. The second challenge was, if you remember, my students are unwilling to speak in class. So let's talk about this and how we can address this problem. We need to build up a stock of minimal responses to express understanding, doubts, and agreement. Again, this goes back to functional language, and just let me remind you that this is a small pool of phrase, but the benefit that they bring to students is huge. They need to be able to have at least 1 or 2 expressions to express understanding, to express doubt, agreement. It will just make them feel more relaxed during speaking. We need to also provide them with key vocabulary or even sample language. And let me give you an example for this. Whenever I give them a topic to talk about, not only do I give them obviously content points that they need to cover, such as talk about the importance of environmental protection and mention the following points, and then they can actually go through these content points, but I always provide them with sample language keywords: sort rubbish, recycle, die out, natural habitat, wildlife reserve, poachers, etc. And I do this not because I think they don't know these words. I do this because I want them to use these words. Just think about it. I'm not sure that every one of us here have ever talked about environmental protection just because we wanted to. So this is a topic that not everybody has actually talked about just for fun. So what I want them to do is just to guide them through this whole process of talking about environmental protection by actually telling them the words they need to use. And I actually do this at higher levels as well. So this is not a cheat sheet. This is not to give them words that they don't know. This is to remind them of the words that they already know, but maybe that they would not want to use if I hadn't told them. So if you want to move students from B2 to C1, it is extremely important to give them key C1 vocabulary to remind them that now we are trying to sort of use more elaborate language, so please try and make sure you use these words. I sometimes even provide them with the more elaborate sample sentences or grammatical structures that are expected at C1, or the ones that were not expected at B2, just to remind them that we are trying to use this and that structure. It really does help. Play music during speaking activities, but I'll talk about this later. Give them a sense of achievement with short and easy to solve speaking tasks. Again, we will talk about this later. And give them a time limit for speaking class. The way I do these time limits is the following. Again, I use a PowerPoint timer. You may have noticed already I use a lot of PowerPoint in my teaching, and I have a very practical reason for this, even though I'm a very dedicated teacher and I love teaching it. In fact, I think it's the only thing I'm actually good at. I tend to be a bit lazy and someone who hates photocopying. And I also tend to be someone who's very environmentally conscious, and I just hate those slips of paper that we use for speaking and the students just throw it away, and I just don't like the idea of photocopying something that they will not keep. So I only print and photocopy when I absolutely have to, and that's why I use PowerPoint in my in teaching speaking, because if you think about it, this is all they need. What they need is a visual input of something that they need to talk about. They just need a picture projected on a wall that they can talk about. They don't need to have it in front of them on a hard copy. They just need to see it. So what I do, as you can see, is that I project PowerPoint slides, and I use PowerPoint timers. I can also send you these timers, but I'm sure most of you are using it already. And I set the timer for a time that I want them to talk about. It just sort of creates a start and an end date for them. And as you can see, for example, at certain levels, for part 4, for example, at C1 level, they have to talk for 2 minutes. And even though they could still pass without being able to talk for 2 minutes, I think it is important that that we train them sort of to be able to speak for 2 minutes, and this will help them, because if they start talking and they can see that they still have loads of time to fill until they reach the 2 minutes, which I think has passed right now, having a look at this timer, they will just very easily learn that they still have basically they still have to say something to fill time. So it just these timers work well, because we can teach students to work to a certain time limit. So how do we start? What you can see right now is, well, we are running up the mountain of speaking on this slope or something, and you can see the 6 levels of CEFR from A1 to C2. And I think the best thing that we can do is actually start at the beginning. And I think this is something that we can help you with a lot. And if you go to cityandguildsenglish.com, you will see that we have 4 practice papers for each level. And I really do want to encourage you to start using our practice papers, spoken practice papers, in your daily teaching, even if you are not preparing students for that given exam. So if you are doing any course, or if you are aiming at a C1 exam or a B2 exam, I really do encourage you to start with our A1 papers and then work your way up to a certain level, obviously, if you are starting to teach these students, because you will find that the A1, A2 papers are just an amazing opportunity to start or to get them speak English, because I don't know how aware of you or how well you know our A1 or A2 papers, so I'm just going to show you one. These are just so simple and very structured speaking tasks that students will have such an amazing sense of achievement. They will feel that they have actually completed a spoken exam, and they have, obviously. So it doesn't matter that if they want to take an actual City and Guilds A1 exam or not. I think our practice papers are just amazing, not just for skills development, but also, if you think about it, by the time they reach the level that they actually want to take a real exam in, they will already know the exam structure. So it's an exam-specific practice as well as skills development. So I think the A1 paper is a very good start for students. I have done it with quite a lot of students of mine, and they just seem so happy that they have completed a spoken exam. They're so happy that they can answer questions, that they can do the basic role play, that they can speak for 1 minute about their family. So I think A1 is actually a very good start. And also I think providing a written script with spoken activities is also a good idea. So like I said before, let's start with A1 and work our way up to whatever level we are aiming at. I just want to give you a brief tour through our exams and how they get more and more difficult. Let's see part 1. You may already know that our part one of our spoken exams it is basically a question and answer session. Interlocutor asks question, the candidate is supposed to answer, and you can see how the questions are getting more and more difficult as we move up the CEFR ladder. Not only do they get longer, but obviously the notion gets more and more complicated. Again, part 2 is about role-playing scenarios, and again we start with very basic questions such as we are friends, I start, have you got a piano? So this will obviously be a very short scenario, and then we just quickly move up, hopefully quickly move up the CFR ladder, and then we reach C1, which is obviously a much more complicated role play, such as, I don't know, I'm interviewing you, I start, in your opinion, what makes you suitable for a job? But again, just to remind you that the structure is basically the same for every level. It just, the language gets more and more sophisticated. That's why they are very good tools to use in daily teaching as well. And again, part 3, we start with the basic picture description at A1. They have to compare the 2 pictures. And then at A2, again, comparing 2 pictures. But as you can see from the difference, this was sort of a stationary kind of picture with not really a lot of movement. And here there is a lot of movement. So clearly what we want from A2 students is to be able to use the present progressive. And this is something that A1 students were not supposed to do. And that B1, yes, we have pictures, but now it's a more complicated task. This is where the discussion is supposed to start, where they actually have to discuss something with the interlocutor, and the discussion goes further in the more advanced levels. And this is what I mentioned before, and I think you will completely agree with me. If they know how to agree and disagree and discuss something and come to an agreement with someone, and they know the functional language for this, does it really matter if what they have to discuss is a class trip or a trip to the World of Fun theme park or how to choose a new flatmate. Does it really matter? I don't think so. Yeah? If they know the functional language, they will be able to discuss this irrespective of the topic that they had been given. And again, part 4 is a long-term task for us, so they will have to talk for a minute at A1, A2, and B1, and then for 1.5 minutes B2, and 2 minutes for C1, 3 minutes for C2, and obviously the situations get, or the topic gets more and more complicated as we move up for more advanced exams. Now, we have already covered 2 challenges, so we have 4 more to cover. Let's see the third one. They are too conscious about mistakes and are afraid to talk. Now let's address this problem. First of all, mistakes and how they occur in the classroom and how they feel exposed to other students because of this. I learned this amazing trick from my Italian teacher when I was learning Italian, is that if you put on music in the classroom, it will create a background noise, and which basically means that nobody will be able to hear your mistakes. Because I very often find that when I do pair work, and then I just remember in my Italian class that I was still speaking, but everybody else has already finished. So I was the only person talking in a completely deadly silent classroom. And I remember once I pretended to have finished because I was so scared that other people are completely silent now and they will hear my horrific Italian mistakes. And I think background music really does help. They feel safer. And also, if you think about it, you can use music as it can act as a timer for the activity. You can teach them that when you stop the music, the speaking activity should basically stop. I know it's a very simple thing, but it really did work with me in my Italian class a lot, and I think it's a great idea. And another thing about mistakes, I know that it depends on your teaching style, how much emphasis you actually put on accuracy, but we really need to remind ourselves that accuracy and fluency are mutually complementary, so the better one of them gets, the worse the other one gets. So the more fluent your candidates are, the less accurate they will be, and vice versa. So this is something that we really need to remind ourselves, and in teaching, fluency comes first. So first they should be fluent, and then they should try to be accurate. So what I do in the initial stage of speaking is I actually do not correct them at all. Unless what errors they make is major and is actually causing misunderstanding, I do not correct their mistakes. I do not take notes when they are speaking, because I know sometimes it feels like when you're taking notes of their mistakes, it's a very subtle way of recording notes. It's not subtle at all, that they know when they are writing that they have made a mistake. So basically, I do not assess them on the spot at all. I do assess them regularly, and we'll talk about this later, but I do not assess them at all in the initial stage. But I don't tell them that they can just do whatever they want. I do give them a focus for every task. I tell them at this stage that the goal is communication, solving the task. So basically problem solving and fluency. This is what I want them to do. Another thing about errors, I try to show them some successful examples, so examples of successful people, successful communicators, and I do a spot the mistake task. And we have brand new spoken exam videos on our website that I really want to recommend you, because they are absolutely beautiful, such good quality, amazing videos, very good candidates. We have done loads of new videos for A1, B1, B2, C1. We have fails and FCPs and passes, so a whole selection that you can choose from. And you can look for a pass student or even an FCP student, so an excellent pass student for a given level. Play it for them and ask them to spot their mistakes. And they will find that even a pass or a first-class pass student makes loads of mistakes. And you can just point it out that you can see that these are effective communicators. They have passed language exams. Still, they make a lot of mistakes, and they will understand that it's not the most important thing that they are accurate in their speaking. Another challenge, if you remember, was the fourth challenge was that strong students dominate conversations. What can we do about it? First of all, We can vary groups around. We can use cards to separate them. Again, I can send you these cards. I have a long list of cartoon characters. And I think this is a good way to create groups of 4. Obviously, you can cheat a bit, and if you want to, you want specific students to work together, you should sort of give them specific cards without them knowing, and that way they will find, well, the right people will find each other. You can see another one at the bottom side of the screen where I used homophones. Again, I have a very long list of cards like this that I can send you, and you can print it off. Just a quick note about strong students: you can put all strong students in one group and then just let them fight it out, let one person dominate the conversation, or you can give strong students a more advanced task so that they are challenged. Or if you have an exceptionally strong set of students, you can organize a debate group for them. But you can also pair strong students with weak students if the task is very controlled and if there is no way that a strong student can completely dominate that task, because that way the weak student can actually learn phrases from the strong student. So it could be, strong students could be a good example for weaker students. The 5th challenge that we talked about was that classes are too big, so there is no way of monitoring if everybody has a chance to speak. We can tackle this problem by keeping groups small, so having a lot of pair work instead of 3 or 4 or 5 student group work. We should also make time for fairly regular project work, and this way we can have a look at their presentation of the project work, and we can have a look at their spoken performance sort of. We need to create our groups very strategically and choose our members very carefully to make sure that each student is a valuable member of the group. When I do projects, I always do a peer evaluation after the project, where every member of the project can report on their fellow project team members. They can also report stuff like, I don't know, I couldn't do my part because X, Y did it for me. So we can just have a look at how well they work together, and I think it is important. And of course, we need to record their speaking at regular intervals, so we have a recording showing what they can do. And if you remember, the 6th little speech bubble said, my students seem unmotivated by the speaking tasks. So let's talk about this for a moment. I think the reason why students seem slightly unmotivated by speaking tasks in class, because they feel deep inside that this is a completely artificial environment. They don't feel like this is like real world. They really feel like this is a school, a language school, a course, which is a completely artificial environment. They are speaking to a teacher, or they are speaking to their fellow students, so they don't feel like they are in an authentic environment. Whereas in the real world, obviously, they will be faced by both native and non-native speakers, and that will actually be an authentic practice opportunity. Another thing that sometimes frustrates students is that in a lot of schools, and again, let me just state it again, I don't know about your school and your teaching style. Maybe this is something that you don't do at all, but in many schools and teaching styles, the teacher chooses both the content and the task. And obviously in the real world, students can choose everything, whatever they want to do with the language, especially through the internet. So this is what they would ideally like to do. And in terms of motivation, during the lesson, rewards are extremely limited. Basically, rewards are grades or language exams, depending on why students are learning and depending on what they want. There are very limited rewards, and that's why motivation is usually very extrinsic in the classroom. Whereas if we could make them fall in love with the English language, the real world could provide them unlimited rewards, and that could actually result in intrinsic motivation. What does this mean? It basically means that we need to engage our students. We need to make them use language spontaneously outside the classroom in an informal context, in genuine, meaningful situations. So what I want them to do is to make English their own. How do we do that? Now, I will give you a few examples, and since I live in Budapest, I'm based in Budapest, obviously I know English-speaking opportunities in Budapest the most. I don't know your own country, your own city, so you need to find your own out-of-classroom activities for your students in your own classroom, but I am assuming there are much more opportunities than here. Obviously, if you are living in an English-speaking country, or if you are teaching in an English-speaking country, the out-of-classroom practice opportunities may be obviously much wider. I'm just going to give you a brief example of what I do with my students. British Council has a 5 o'clock tea sort of conversation class every Wednesday that students can go to. We have English language stand-up comedy, English language theater, and obviously English language cinema. What you should also do in your classroom is monitor their engagement with language. And the way I do it is the European Language Passport. If you Google this term, a whole project will come up that you can have a look at. It's basically a document that you can use, or that students can use for monitoring what they can actually do with the language, and not just language examinations, but what they can actually do. What you can also do is have a dashboard with their achievements, where you can put post-it notes such as, I helped a group of tourists to get to the parliament yesterday, or I met at the weekend I met a group of tourists who didn't know how to use the local transportation system, so I explained to them. And I know it sounds a bit silly, but this is actual engagement with the language, and I think it is absolutely important that you monitor this and that you keep track of whether or not your students have any engagement with the language outside of the classroom. Because if you can engage them, then your job is done, basically. Because if you think about it, if they started using English outside of the classroom, they could very easily learn English. And the third stage of engagement is to actually create out-of-classroom activities for them. You can organize weekly English conversational clubs in the school or in the language school, English language theater club. I have done it once with my own students. We participated in an annual student drama festival. We didn't do very well, we didn't win, but students loved it a lot. And if you think about it, theater is amazing because they actually have to memorize their lines. So basically they will have a large pool of phrases that they will almost always remember forever. So theater is great. You can organize cultural quizzes for them. I have once done a 7-round English-speaking countries quiz that was highly popular with the students in my high school. And every round had sort of a quiz, also sort of a knowledge-based test part, but we also had the fun part, such as for the round of the US, they had to bake American cookies and cakes, and then it was just an amazing experience for them all. You can also organize English language quiz nights for them, cinema nights, and if you are not a native speaker yourself, so if you're a non-native teacher, you can bring a native speaker to class, and you will see that there will be students who have never met a native speaker, especially, once again, let me repeat this, if you are not living in an English-speaking country currently, it might be a good idea to bring a native friend you have to class and then just have your students ask them questions. And just a brief note about using the internet in teaching speaking. I will try to be brief here, since I wrote my thesis on how to use the internet for teaching the 4 skills. So I could go on, I think, forever about what to do with the internet. But if you have a look at this screen, you will see that there are different means through which students can reach the real world. And I have tried to, well, basically, as you can see, the fonts are getting bigger, and the bigger they are, the more opportunities that area provides our students with. And I find that personal contacts with native speakers of the given language are not very easy to find. Let me give you just my own example. I have spent 5 years of my life learning Italian, yet I do not have Italian friends. And I have been to Italy, still I don't have Italian friends. It's not as easy as it sounds to find native speaker friends. So even though it would be the most ideal to have personal contacts with native speakers, it is difficult for most students. So what we are left with is subtitled films, musics and lyrics, books and magazines, and the internet. No, my thesis is not available on the internet, but maybe I can send you. So podcasts are very interesting parts of could be a very interesting part of teaching speaking. It's very easy, well, at least for most of your students, it will be extremely easy to create podcasts, and VoiceThread is another website that you can start using. And even though chatting and instant messaging is actually written, research suggests that the whole style and grammar involved with chatting and IMing is actually completely like speaking. So that's why methodology books now say that internet chatting and instant messaging is actually the internet form of teaching. And if you think about it, it is true. Because if you have a look at this chat box right now, it is like speaking. Even though you are typing, you are not proofreading what you are saying. You're not thinking about what you're writing. It's not a real example of writing. The genre is not writing when it comes to chatting and IMing. It is actually like speaking, and it has all the characteristics of speaking. That's why chatting and IMing is an amazing opportunity for your students to actually converse with others in English. Obviously, yes, using words, but some IM hosts such as can't remember, I think even not just Skype, but even IMing hosts such as WhatsApp now have a completely sort of oral feature where they can send each other actual recorded sentences very easily. And of course you can recreate a virtual classroom where you can get your students to talk and chat. And last but not least, in fact, I think this is a very important part of the training, so please, I hope you still have some of your attention span reserved for the rest of this training, is how to provide feedback and how to assess spoken performance. Now, I think assessment of spoken performance is absolutely vital, and again, let me just give you an example of my Italian language learning experience. I was always very frustrated where I got no feedback on my spoken performance. And I could understand that the whole point was for me to be more fluent. But I thought that I just needed to know if I was good enough. And students are really hungry for feedback on their spoken performance. It would help them with their anxiety issues if they knew how good they were. And also, in my experience, students are much better than they think they are. And this is what recording them will help with. So please make sure you actually record their voice, obviously not a video. You can do a video if you want to, but just make sure you record their voice regularly, and you use that recording for some sort of evaluation. And let's see what types there are. There is obviously self-evaluation. Self-evaluation is a very good tool for students. You can use that language portfolio, if you remember, that I've mentioned before. They can self-evaluate themselves using that language portfolio, listing every opportunity that they have had so far to use English. They can also use the can-do statements to evaluate their performance. They can also use that dashboard, if you remember, the I helped the tourist yesterday kind of thing. And they are usually very happy with basic stuff like I helped the tourist yesterday. They really are very happy, and it provides them with a sense of achievement. Depending on the relationship between group members, or on the general atmosphere and dynamics of that given group, we can do peer evaluation. The way how I do peer evaluation is, first of all, through project work. Whenever I do project work, I always distribute a peer evaluation form after the project work is done. And I always ask the group members or the team members to evaluate the rest of the team members, how cooperative they were, how dominant they were, how aggressive they were, how easy they were to work with. And when I regularly give presentation tasks to students, they have to prepare with the topic that they know and they have to present it to the class. And I, again, distribute peer evaluation forms for everyone to vote on how good the presentation was. And then we have group evaluation. I think group evaluation is great when you have an entire class evaluating sample performance. You can obviously use these sample spoken exams that we can find on the cityandguildsenglish.com website. You can just play it for them, and they can well, evaluate these people's performance. It's great because your students don't know these people, so they will be free to express their thoughts. And finally, we have a teacher evaluation, which obviously is usually the most important, but I think the other three is a very valuable tool of assessment. So let's see teacher evaluation in more detail. There are lots of ways in which we can provide our students with feedback, and I think it is absolutely important that we do some sort of formal assessment regularly. How regularly depends on how much time you have and how much time you can actually focus on this, but have formal assessment of spoken performance regularly, and you should always do it according to a detailed mark scheme. So even though what you can see here in this picture is just a very basic assessment of excellent, good, average, and poor, in real life, I would like you to be much more specific and think about the fact that you are giving actually feedback to these students about their performance. So marks, grades, and just telling them that they are amazing or good is not enough. We really need to be specific so that they know what their strengths are and what their weak points are, and that's how mark schemes can help you with this, and I will share our B2 level mark scheme with you later on. Also, when you assess, it is important to bear in mind what I said about fluency and accuracy. Please make sure first you focus on fluency, and once your students are fluent enough, you can then move on to teach them how to be accurate. You can also, if you want to, you can also assess them according to the can-do statements. Or you can also assess them from a communication point of view, and I think that's something that works amazingly. So let me show you what I mean. This is one of the sort of exams or quick tests that I have them do regularly. And this is just assessing from a communication point of view. You are not looking for their for the quality of language that they use. What you want is for them to solve tasks. You remember previously I said that I usually start with putting the emphasis on fluency and problem solving and task solving. Now this is a very good example of such a test, and I think it gives them such a sense of achievement when you tell them that right now they are going to be assessed whether or not they can do this. And as you can see, I give them 10 tasks to solve, and they have to do it. And then I basically assess how many they could do out of the 10. And believe me, it gives them an amazing sense of achievement when they feel like these are things that they could now go out in real life and do all of these with anyone. So I think this is a good idea to start with, just to assess them from a problem-solving, task-solving, communication point of view without any detailed mark scheme. So this is just a basic assessment from a communication point of view. Like I said, please record them regularly. And what you do with the recording depends on you. You can you can assess it according to a mark scheme yourself, or you can, depending on the group relationships, you can use this recording for self-evaluation or even peer evaluation. I think it is a good idea to have students listen to their own voice and their own spoken performance every now and then, because, like I said before, they usually think they are worse than they actually are. So it really gives them a good feeling when they listen to their own voice and they feel like, oh, my fluency is much better than I thought. Oh, how long I could speak, etc. And finally, like what I said before, group evaluation of our sample spoken exams work very well. And now, if you remember, I said that when it comes to formal assessment, you should use a detailed mark scheme. And even though I'm sure most of you prepare for language exams, maybe some of you prepare for our language exam. And yes, in language exams, basically most students think about language exams as a means of, well, it's a question of pass or fail. So it's a question of success and failure. But I see it completely differently. I think every language exam is an opportunity to get feedback on your performance. And I think even if they fail, which I hope they won't, but even if they fail, it's an opportunity for them to have a look at the exact marks and have a look at what their strong points and what their weak points are. Now, if you have a look at this mark scheme, you can see that I have highlighted the Mark II for you. And let me just remind you, this is the B2 level spoken mark scheme that we are using in our language examination system. And what you can see is that the Mark II, which is the pass mark, has been highlighted. The reason why I highlighted this is that this is the sort of border between pass and fail, and this is something that you really need to make sure you observe. Now, the way a mark scheme works, obviously, is that you try to match the spoken performance that you can hear to the descriptor in one of the boxes. If you think that whatever you are hearing is matching the descriptor in a given box, give them the corresponding mark. I don't want to go into a lot of details because I'm sure you understand. So let's start with the with pronunciation. For candidates to achieve a pass at B2 level, need to have a pronunciation which is reasonably clear and is mostly understood without difficulty. If, however, you feel that the candidate's pronunciation puts undue strain on the listener, who's going to be you, or the influence of their mother tongue is extremely strong, or in fact the influence of the mother tongue sometimes impedes understanding the message, give them 0 or 1 points. Let's move on to vocabulary. B2 level requires sufficient range of language, but it also allows for some searching for vocabulary. Again, when you mark a spoken performance, like we are going to do in about 60 seconds, think about what you can hear and try to match it with one of the descriptors in the box. If what you can hear is limited range, and which is insufficient to cope with the tasks, then give them 1 point or even 0 if you think that the range is so restricted that the candidate finds himself or herself, finds it difficult to express himself or herself. Let's move on to grammar. Again, listen to what the candidate is saying and decide if there is a relatively high degree of lexical and grammatical control without impeding errors, then give them 2 points or maybe even higher if you think they are excellent or they fit this descriptor. But if you think that the errors that they make put strain on you, then give them 1 or 0 points. And finally, fluency. When you mark spoken performance according to our exam, please use this box to mark part 1, 2, 3, and this box to mark part 4. Okay? And what do we want for fluency in order for someone to pass? A fluent and natural interaction, basically continuous communication. And in part 4, we want a clear message with some jerkiness in extended speech. What we do not want, however, is frequent hesitation, repetition, and attempts to repair language. Okay, I just want to remind you that this is the mark scheme for B2. So obviously for lower level the mark scheme would be different. And that's why when you do a formal assessment of performance, it is important that you familiarize yourself with CEFR and you use the appropriate can-do statements or the appropriate mark schemes in order to decide how good they are. Now, I hope now you are more or less familiar with our B2 mark scheme, because what I have sent you is actually a B2 exam. So what I would like you to do now is, without leaving this training, without closing any of the control panels or anything, I would like you to open that audio that you have downloaded. And let me just repeat, if you haven't downloaded it so far, that's fine, no problem. Please just scroll up in this chat box, and the first entry you will find in the chat box is actually that Dropbox link, so you can download it now. And I would like you to mark that spoken exam that I sent you according to this mark scheme. Don't worry, I will go back in a second. And please enter your fluency, grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation marks here. Enter it for every part, because it is extremely important. Like I said before, I think it is very important that we be objective in assessing spoken performance, and I think it is much more objective if we don't come to a conclusion about whether or not the student is a pass or fail based on an overall impression that we have, but we stick to the mark scheme and we evaluate every part completely separately. So please listen to the recording and, well, either on a piece of paper or somewhere, enter your marks here. And once you have done that, please make sure you enter the final evaluation, which can be the final mark, or better yet, just enter whether you think this candidate is a pass or a fail. And again, just to remind you that in our exam, 50% is the pass mark. Okay, so they need 50% of the total marks. So in this case, for example, obviously you would need 50% of the total marks in order to pass. Okay, but I think the marks are not entirely that important. I just want you to listen to that recording that I sent you, and please decide if you think that they are supposed to pass, fail, or maybe receive an FCP for their exam. So what will happen right now is that I will stop talking, but I will still remain here. But I will stop talking, otherwise obviously you can't listen to me and the recording as well. And please make sure you mark that exam, and once you have done that, which will approximately be in about 30 minutes from here, because the exam is 13 minutes, I think, if I remember correctly. And please come back here and enter your final grading in the chat box. So enter the words pass, fail, or FCP in the chat box. That's how I will know that you have already finished. Is it clear? I hope. I will stop talking now. Leave the mark scheme on the screen. Please mark that student according to this mark scheme. And I will be back with you in 13 minutes. If you have any problems during this time, enter it in the chat box and I will answer in writing. Right. I can see most of you have finished. So let's have a look at the marks. If you want to have a total of marks and decide on that, let me remind you that you need basically 50% of the total marks to decide on a pass and fail. Okay, but since why we are here is basically trying to decide how to assess spoken performance, I think it is absolutely important that we decide if we want to pass or fail the candidate. So even the people who have entered their total marks, could you please tell us if you think this candidate should pass or fail? Okay. We have a few passes. I have seen a few fails before. Right, so I think we have a very mixed opinion of this candidate, because I have seen at least 2 or 3 fails, and now I see quite a lot of passes. So I'm sure you are eager to see what it is. And actually, this student is a fail. And if you have already visited the cityandguildsenglish.com website, you will see that I was a bit cheeky, and I actually used one of the B2 spoken exams from the brand new spoken exam videos, and this candidate's video is already uploaded to the cityandguildsenglish.com website. And if you have seen that video, you will already know that this is a fail video. This student has failed. For those of you who think that this candidate should pass, let me walk you through the problems that he has. Let's see fluency problems. There is some jerkiness in his speech, communicates with pauses and hesitation. Let me just go back and remind you that a lot of hesitation is actually the 1 point mark or the 0 point mark, which is actually 1 and 0 is, well, basically it's a path to fail. So if your candidates score very low and always below this gray area, so always somewhere here, it means that they are sort of more or less failing or would fail this, the B2 exam. So where was I? Communicates with pauses and hesitation. Thinks about what to say a lot. Pauses are very noticeable at times. Can you remember the completely silent periods that you have had to suffer through? Very long pauses. Why do you think the pauses are that long? What do you think? It's because this candidate currently, at this moment, does not have the grammar and vocabulary required at a B2 exam. That's why you need to look out for pauses. It's not that we don't pause when we speak in real life, but I think, yes, I'm not going to repeat what Esther just wrote in the chat box, but yes, I do agree with you. The reason why he's pausing that much is because he doesn't have the grammar and vocabulary required for this level, and that's why he has to think a lot about what he wants to say, and that's why we have so many pauses. What about part 4? His speech in part 4 is difficult to follow, partly due to the large number of pauses and partly due to the way his thoughts are organized. Now, part 4 is interesting because if you think about part 4, he seems relatively good compared to the rest of the exam. But why do you think that is? Why is he slightly better in part 4? Any ideas? Because he was lucky enough to get a topic that he was familiar with. Well, he hadn't prepared it before because he didn't know it's a mock exam and he didn't know what topic he was going to get. But he sounds like this is the only topic that he knows well. He must be an amazing skateboard fan. It's clear that he loves skateboard. It's clear that he knows all the technical expressions involved in skateboard. And if you think about his vocabulary, and I'm going to jump to vocabulary now, his range of vocabulary is extremely limited throughout the entire exam. He has loads of errors, and all of a sudden in part 4, his vocabulary is good, but it's only because his topic was the life and achievements of a person you admire. And he was clever enough to choose someone that he knows very well. And pretty sure that he's a massive skateboard fan, and he actually knows this person, whoever that person is, I don't know him. He knows everything about his life by heart, because he must be a massive fan. And that's why his part 4 speech is slightly better. But if you think about it, a slightly better part 4 is not saving his exam, because in part 1, part 2, part 3, he was really very bad. And if you think about it, even part 4 is not that good. It's slightly better, but it's still extremely difficult to follow, and there are loads of pauses and breaks. What about grammar? He uses structures way below B2, and even with them, he's not confident. So A1, A2 structures are used without any confidence. So he doesn't really have the basic grasp of grammar. Well, his voice was a bit trembling, it's true, but this was a mock exam that he volunteered for. See, so yes, it seems like he's nervous, but yeah, but it was not a real exam. It was a mock exam, so it's important to know that even if he was nervous, maybe it was because he knew that we are going to video him, and the video is going to go on our website, maybe. But he did volunteer, obviously, so this is what he wanted. Yes, I know. He makes frequent errors, and he does not understand quite a lot of things. And let me just a bit of, I don't know, insider information or something for you if you prepare students for this exam. It's not that we don't allow asking for clarification, and it's not that not understanding things is not allowed, but he did not understand quite a lot of things, and this was due to the lack of adequate range of language. He did not understand a lot of things because he doesn't have the grammar and vocabulary required for B2. And let's move on to pronunciation. He had a very strong mother tongue influence, which is sort of more or less acceptable, but he did make quite a lot of pronunciation errors as well. For example, congestion charge. Now, I think when you assess your students' spoken performance, of course you can choose any mark scheme you want to use, but if you choose ours or any other, make sure that your mark scheme is detailed, and make sure that you mark them according to each criterion completely separately, unrelated to the others, so that you actually give them feedback. So the feedback what we can give to this candidate, that unfortunately for all 4 criteria, he is right now below B2 level, his fluency is not at B2 level, his structures are not at B2 level, and his range was not at B2 level. And we can also always give them suggestions how they can practice, such as, I think pronunciation is very easy to improve by watching films in English with subtitles, or vocabulary can be improved by reading books and articles or reading the news, etc. So I think it is always important to have regular formal assessment with the help of a recording, because that's the only way with which we can actually give our students a completely objective assessment. And I think this leads us to the end of this training, and I want to thank you for your active participation. And I think it is important to bear in mind that speaking is extremely important for our students. So we should try and make sure we provide them with every support we can. So thank you again for coming and for your active participation. If you have any questions about our future trainings or about anything related to our exams, you please feel free to drop me an email, and I will come back to you as soon as I can. And thank you very much for participating, and I will send you all the materials that we have used today. Okay, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.